Welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk about a few things today. I got a response from the Maine National Guard. I sent them an email concerning this earthquake story, and they responded. So we're going to read that first. Then we're just going to discuss a little bit, some stuff going on, and then we're going to read out of the Bible Concordance, because I got some names of you guys I meant to read, and I got some other terms that are important to our studies. So let's start with this email. Yesterday, I emailed the Maine National Guard up in Kalai. I think that's how you pronounce it. So we're on the northern Maine border across from St. Stephen, Canada. This is the main city of Kalai. It's right next to Robbinston, which is right here. I'll zoom out so you can get a bearing. Okay. So these coordinates right here, 45.095 north, 67.160 west, are the exact coordinates given by the USGS, the Geological Survey, for where this earthquake happened. And you can see here, this is all heavily logged area. As they log, they replant, but you can still see, like, here's a freshly replanted area. So this is a busy area. It's all logging, all this, right? Very interesting. So this is where the alleged earthquake, that's where it happened. And there's a lot of stuff going around. So we've covered what's going on with China, the US, UK, New Zealand, peacekeepers all training with the Chinese army for winter survival, all sorts of different stuff. Then we have this F-16 going down in Michigan. My brother was just telling me the F-16 was flying at night with one pilot fully armed, and they're saying it's a training mission. So that's a little sketchy, because it looks more like a scramble. I've never heard of pilots training at night alone with a fully armed fighter craft. It's kind of weird, but I'm not a pilot, so I don't know. But yeah, that plane went down. The guy's dead. And then we have Hal Turner and a lot of other people saying that this earthquake was actually a missile or bomb attack targeting Chinese troops. Now, I don't know what to believe, but we have something like 9 aircraft carriers off the east and west coast of our country, which has never been done before. I don't know how many it is. I think it's that many. But yeah, something's going on. Something big is going on. So I emailed the National Guard. And one second. I was pretty straightforward. I was like, listen, I talked about the Rebel News expose about the Chinese troops. I talked about, all the fake news, I guess we'll call it, going around about these events. And I said, with all this going on, it's kind of obvious the earthquake story is a cover. If you can provide any information, it would be wonderful. I told him that I'm just an independent researcher from Portland. He responded, "Good morning, Mr. Whitney. Thank you for reaching out to the Maine National Guard. We do have an armory in Kalai, yes. Our 1136 Transportation Company, based in Bangor, has a detachment that performs their monthly weekend training there. As we're not subject matter experts, we're not able to speculate on the nature of the recent earthquake activity. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Very respectfully, Major Carl Lamb." That's awesome. That made my day, getting an email from Major Carl Lamb. That's so cool. I was not expecting a response, but thank you, Major Carl. I hope you're a fan of the show. I hope you watch. And he didn't say no. He said, we're not experts, so we cannot speculate. And then he said, very respectfully. I have a feeling he might know what we do on the internet here. Maybe this guy is a patriot. Maybe he's a white hat. He did not deny it. And that's important. So we got to keep our eyes open. We got to prepare for the craziest things happening. Truth is always stranger than fiction. So get your things ready. If the power goes down, just know it's on. I'm just kidding. But I couldn't find it. But apparently, I think yesterday, NASA, in a press conference, said there's a potential for a coronal mass ejection or a solar wind to knock out power in the very near future. For potentially 6 days. If you find this, let me know. My brother was telling me about it. They literally were saying this, and they're saying this could happen very soon. Now, if you've been following 17, I still do a little bit. People are saying that today, the 14th, marks the beginning of the 10 days of darkness because the president just made Christmas Eve a federal holiday by executive order. So we very well could be in the 10 days of darkness, whether you believe it's 17 or you believe it's the 10 days from the Bible, doesn't matter. The point is, it's happening. Something's happening. There was an eclipse. The VAX is moving out. 10 days. NASA's saying we might lose power for 6 days. Christmas Eve being a holiday. Something's going on here. So once again, Major Carl Lamb, thank you for responding. I hope you watch the show. Okay, let's get to the Bible. Or the Bible Concordance, I should say. A couple of you asked me to look up your names. That was like a week ago. And not only did that, but we're going to talk about some definitions as well that are important to our studies. Definitions that are used by Freemasonry and stuff. So, the first one I'm going to do is Adam, because one of you viewers wanted me to do your name Adam. All it says for Adam is the first man, obviously. But then it refers us to the section titled man. What is man? What is human, right? In biblical terms. Let me read. The Bible views man more in an existentialist than in an essentialist way. That is, man is considered in the concrete, with his multiple relationships to the world, to his fellow man, and to God, rather than in his essence. So according to this, the views on what man is are concrete in our Christian world, right? And today, obviously, the devil is working very hard to confuse that and to make man fluid. We see it going on everywhere with transgenderism and all that jazz. No attempt is made to define him or his various components, such as his nature, his body, soul, or spirit. Biblical anthropology, then, is a series of factual assertions about man, which are never subjected to philosophical analysis or reflection. For this reason, one must not search in the Bible for a fixed and precise terminology. It is not there. One must note first of all that the Bible sees man as a unity of body and soul, without conceiving of any possible separation or opposition in concrete existence between the embodied soul or the animated body. I don't think a lot of Christians know that. I didn't really know that. But body and soul are one, are concrete. That's a powerful word to use. Concrete. And today we totally differentiate between the two. Everybody does, right? They even say your soul has weight. Some people do. Okay. Let's see, where did I leave off? From this arise the difficulties in translating such terms as nephis, or soul, and basar, flesh, which for the Jew did not mean the different components of man, but rather as different aspects of the same individual. The first page of the Bible offers an insight that in fact conditions the whole biblical concept of man. He is created by God, and humanity is created as man and woman. And as God's image, man is God's image, because he is king of creation, that is, God's viceroy on earth, and therefore Lord of all inferior creatures. This image, however, has also an aspect that is God-directed. For as God's vicar on earth, man is responsible to God and can be involved in conversation with God in a dialogue that is most profound dimension of his history. There's more. The second account of creation contains texts that are packed with biblical doctrine on man. In Genesis 2:7, the author uses the relationship between the words Adam, man, and Adamah, earth, a kind of pun, to give a profile of man's place in creation. Man is made from the dust of the earth. On the form thus shaped, from the dust God breathed a breath of life, and thus we had a living person. Interesting. They always want to tell us we're stardust, right? They always want to tell us we come from stars. Everybody is stardust. Not according to this. We're just dust. Just regular old blue-collar dust. Okay. The Bible neither favors nor contradicts the theory of evolution, for it is dealing with man on a different plane. The idea of man being formed from the earth is something also found among other ancient peoples. The conviction comes from elementary observation. After his death, man returns to dust. It also, however, shows a value judgment on man. That is, it shows the basis of man's fragility and inconsistency, and so his absolute dependence on God, who shaped him as a potter shapes his wares from clay. Quote, "Why are dust and ashes proud? Even during life, man's body decays." End quote. Another quote, "Like clay in the hands of a potter, to be molded according to his pleasure, so are men in the hands of their Creator, to be assigned by him their function." End quote. In speaking of this conception, Job addresses God, quote, "Remember that you fashioned me from clay." End quote. Man is dust. He is also tied with parental links to the Adamah, the earth, which is the natural environment on which he depends. He is a man of the earth, from the earth. Interesting sentence about evolution. This book was published in 1970. The Bible neither favors nor contradicts the theory of evolution. Let's break that down a little bit. Well, it clearly doesn't favor it, right? Because God created all life in the first week. But that doesn't mean there isn't some sort of evolution in our world, right? We evolve every day as people. Things do evolve, just not in the overall Darwinian sense, okay? It's not over yet, Adam. This is all about you, buddy. On this man, shaped from the dust of the earth, God breathes a breath of life, and thus man becomes a living person. This second step in man's formation has its deeper dimension. God is the unique and exclusive dispenser of life. God freely breathes the breath of life and can withdraw it whenever he pleases. God's breath animates everything that is alive, both men and animals. Man is free and responsible, but not autonomous. Wow. Man's actual condition is one of trouble and sorrow, even burdened with pain when he carries out his essential functions of work in the earth and when woman fulfills her call to motherhood. The relationship between the sexes has been distorted. All this, however, must not be blamed on the Creator. Man refused to obey, that is, to surrender himself to God's will for him. This will of God was not something that arose from caprice, nor a jealous retention of rights and privileges, but a design or plan inspired by God's goodness. If man had opened himself to God's design, then he would have enjoyed it. He detached himself from God, thus giving rise to death. For the only source of life is God. Man, in his fragility, carries around with him the seeds of his own destruction. Wow. Beautiful. Dude, it goes on and on and on. I don't know if I can read all this, Adam. But this paragraph was very interesting. Let's go back to the beginning of it. The relationship between the sexes has been distorted. The will of God was not something that arose from caprice, nor a jealous retention of rights and privileges. Now, the Satanists, the Luciferians, the Freemasons, the Mystery Babylon religion will have you believe that Eden was a prison. Yes, it was a beautiful garden, but it was a prison of ignorance, and God was holding Adam and Eve there as prisoners, really, prisoners in their own minds. And it was a serpent through the forbidden fruit that gave them knowledge, right? And the first reaction to after eating the fruit is they realize they're naked. It's like the original sin, right? And they cover themselves up, and that's what gives it away to God. And it's very interesting because Genesis and Exodus, the beginnings of the Old Testament, they give a genealogy, you know, the story of the generations following Adam. And these people lived for like 1,000 years, and as time goes on, as these generations pass, the age gets lower and lower and lower. And I'm starting to believe that there's some literal like facts behind this, because listen to this. He detached himself from God, thus giving rise to death. Right? So that original sin began a decay, began a de-evolution, right? From our once mirrored image of godliness that we had. We were once much closer to God. And through that forbidden fruit, through that original sin, thus began the rise of death, the process of decay. So when you read Genesis and you hear that Noah died at 960 years old, might be legit. It's pretty crazy, right? Okay, we did Adam. What else we got here? Apocalyptic literature. Let's read about that. a literary genre that was common in Judaism from the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD, and from which several of the apocryphal writings of the Old Testament have come down to us. Its principal common characteristics are the following. 1. As the name indicates, apocalypsis means revelation. Apocalyptic writing is the literature of revelation. Its intention is to transmit to the reader the revelations ordinarily had by great personages of the history of Israel, such as Moses, Ezra, Baruch, and Enoch. It is different, however, from the prophetic literature, which is also literature of revelation, in that for the prophets the organ of transmission of the revelation is the word of God, while for the apocalypses it is above all in vision that revelation takes place. These can be symbolic visions, but at other times it is a question of a direct vision of divine things. It is on this point that the common theme of the ascents of famous personages is built. There, by exception, they are invited to contemplate with their own eyes the habitation of God and his heavenly court, the most secret mechanisms of creation, and above all, what God has in store for the future. In this sense, too, apocalyptic writing not only appear as the succession of God's interventions to bring to realization his salvific designs, but as the successive manifestation at the opportune moments, and especially in the future, of the realities created at the beginning, before the world came to be, such as the Messiah, the law, the glory of the saints, and so on. These realities await the moment of their manifestation before the eyes of man. Cool. There's a lot more to that too, but we're going to continue. Okay, of course we have to read about Baal. B-A-A-L. Baal. Okay, Baal. Hebrew and other Semitic languages have in common the word Baal, meaning Lord, Master, which is also equivalent to such modes of address as Your Excellency. With time, this name, for all practical purposes, became identified with the god of rain, the storm god, and the god of fertility in the Canaanite pantheon. This god's proper name was Hadad. Baal represented the active element in fertility and was by far the most popular among the Canaanite gods. Though not the supreme one, the latter's name was El, the father of the gods. Baal is frequently associated with Anat, his sister and wife in Canaanite mythology. Among the religious texts discovered at Ras Shamra, the ancient Ugarit, there are 3 tablets with poems celebrating the deeds and prowess of Baal. The first poem treats of the battle between Baal and Yam, the sea, to whom El, God, had conceded power over the earth and over Baal. Baal is unhappy with the situation and, helped by Kothar we Karis, the artisan and wise god, he engages in battle with Yam, whom he overcomes with a blow to the head. In this way, Baal secures his domination over the earth against any danger from the waters of the open sea. Many of the elements of these Semite myths were used to express the biblical account of creation as a work of the Lord. Another poem sings of Baal's victory over Mot, or death. Baal is invited by Mot to come down into the depths of the earth. There is a lacuna in the text, and then occurs El's mourning over the death of Baal. Anat, Baal's companion, now begins an anxious search for her husband. She asks Mot to free his prisoner, but Mot refuses. Finally, Anat is victorious, and so Baal returns to life and recovers his dominion over the earth. This myth obviously represents the cycle of the year's seasons, with winter's death and spring's resurgence. Classic. There's a little bit more. I think we know where this is going. The worship of Baal was a great and powerful rival to the worship of Israel's God through Old Testament history up to the exile. At times the worship of the Lord seemed to be submerged by the increasing favor granted to the worship of Baal, and to be transformed into a dangerous syncretism, so severely and decidedly denounced by the prophets, according to Judges 6:25-30. Gideon's father built an altar to Baal, who was venerated by the neighboring peoples. It was, however, during the time of Ahab of Israel that Baal worship had its greatest vogue. He had married Jezebel, the daughter of the king of Tyre. She gave open protection to the worship of the Canaanite god, keeping her own priests and prophets and persecuting those loyal to the Lord. Elijah was an object of her spiritual or special hatred. The books of Kings also record the periodic attempts of various kings to eradicate or contain the spread of Baalism. Asa of Judah, Jehu of Israel, Hezekiah, Josiah, supported by the zeal of prophets like Elisha, Isaiah, and Jeremiah, were among the most determined religious reformers of Israelite history. Now, I say it quite often, I haven't said it in a while, but the pre-Christian world was plagued with human sacrifice and cannibalism. Think of the word cannibal. Canaan Baal, right? Cannibal, Canaan Baal, Baal of the Canaanites. Let me look up something real quick. And Baal worship is, of course, affiliated with human sacrifice. And there was a lot of that going on. Now, some of the books that talk about that are removed from the Bible, like the Book of Jasher, but it's well known that Baal was bad. And, you know, the first pictures that are going to come up are the child, right? The child being sacrificed. Great example right there. Here's another example. It's a popular one. Let me move my face, right? The golden calf, Baal, and the baby being handed up to be sacrificed into the golden calf. You can see a great example on the right here. Yeah. Bad stuff. Let me get some more coffee. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. What's next? Let's see here. We talked about Baal. What else we got? Brother. No, let's keep looking. Some of your names are in here. You'll know. Let's do Dan. Dan. Dan is the 5th son of Jacob. Born in Bilhah, Rachel's slave. Born of Bilhah, Rachel's slave. So, Jacob's fifth son, born of Bilhah, Rachel's slave. Okay, I get it. Founding father of the tribe of Dan. This tribe first tried to settle on the coastal plains of Palestine, but failed. They then migrated to the extreme north and established themselves in the territory whose capital was Laish, later named Dan. Judges 17 through 18 tells the story of his migration in detail. Their intent is to explain the origins of the sanctuary in the city of Dan, which together with that of Bethel was to become the official sanctuary of the northern kingdom after the schism of Jeroboam. I haven't heard of that. The city of Dan is often mentioned as the northern limit of Israelite territory, where Beersheba was its southern limit. For a time, Dan was occupied by the Arameans of Damascus. There's also Daniel. Daniel is a quasi-legendary figure whose name appears in the Canaanite writings of Ugarit, and whose fame and integrity are linked with those of Noah and Job and Ezekiel. I find that interesting. I didn't know that Daniel was a Canaanite thing. All right, let's keep going. What else we got here? Jabesh, Jabal, Jabin, Jabin. Oh, Jachin and Boaz. Let's talk about the Masonic pillars. Let me take a sip. Jachin and Boaz, 2 bronze pillars, 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in girth, topped by capitals in cast bronze and elaborately decorated, which Solomon had erected in front of the vestibule of the sanctuary. He named the pillar on the right Jachin, and the one on the left Boaz. The interpretation of the names is disputed. The first one could mean, he will establish, or well-founded, and the second could mean strength. Some authors consider them a phrase in which God is addressed, an invocation asking his blessing on the temple. Others hold that they are the names given them by Hiram of Tyre. Wow, Hiram Abiff of Tyre. Their artisan. On account of their dimensions, the function of the pillars remains obscure, even though there are parallels in Phoenician and Canaanite religious architecture. Let's read Jacob. Jacob, the third of the 3 great patriarchs of Israel. He was son of Isaac and Rebekah, and twin brothers of Esau. That's really interesting. So, of course, the Masons have a perverted version of this Temple of Solomon. I've never really like sat down and read a very long Masonic interpretation of the Temple of Solomon. I need to do that. Okay, and Jacob, it says here, is a son of Rebekah. That's interesting because there's a Masonic affiliated group called the Daughters of Rebekah. Yeah, right here. I have lots of pictures with this symbol on graves from around the area. Ooh, look at this one. You got the Masonic beehive, 7 wandering stars. Oh yeah. Anyway, that's something we're going to have to really dig into on an episode. But let's keep reading about Jacob. The Bible, however, explains the name from the fact that at birth, Jacob was grasping his twin brother's heel. While the name is made to derive from the fact that Jacob supplanted Esau, depriving him of the right of firstborn, and especially of the blessing of Isaac, which he deceitfully took from his brother. Interesting. During the night at Bethel, Jacob had a vision. A ladder appeared to him, based on the earth but reaching up to heaven, and on it the angels of God ascended and descended. At the top was the Lord, who confirmed to Jacob the promises he had made to Abraham. When Jacob awakened, he took his pillow stone and erected it into a monument, pouring oil over it, and changed the name of the place from Luz to Bethel, which means the house of God. Wow. Jacob's ladder, once again, a very Masonic concept. I'm gonna have to see if I can find a Freemason concordance. I think I have one, actually. I just haven't been doing much work on it lately. Yeah, not the ladder I'm talking about, Google. Here's a great example of Masonic Jacob's ladder scene, right? Very interesting. Let's move on. Let's see what we got here. Kidneys. Okay, moving on. What we got here? Of course, we got to talk about Lucifer. Let's talk about light and darkness, though, because those are concepts used by 17 and by all sorts of people. Let's touch up on the meaning of them. Light and darkness. The combination light-darkness is very widely used in religious symbolism. In the Bible, it occupies a preeminent position. This is especially true of John's Gospel, where it is employed to present Jesus' own mission. This light-darkness combination is principally used not in its intellectual sense to express knowledge and ignorance, but in a sense that can be called soteriological. This sense is already evident in the account of creation. God's first creative action is, in fact, his overcoming darkness through light. In flooding the primordial chaos of darkness with light, God accomplished the first and fundamental work towards the creation of the cosmos where life would be possible. Already on the first page of the Bible, light darkness appeared destined to be symbols respectively of life salvation and death damnation. Perhaps symbolism is too weak a word to express the relationship that arose between the two notions, for both light and darkness seem to have a real consistency in the mind of the author, and to have a real operative continuity with life and death. So one encounters in the Bible phrases like the light of life, or of the living, and of the shade, or darkness of the dead. The mention of light then evokes the concepts of the gift of life, well-being and pleasures of life, salvation, just as darkness is associated with death and the habitation of the dead, and with sin. This general description acquires a more specific religious value when it is placed expressly in relationship with God. God is the one author of life, and so is proclaimed the one true source of light. The connection between light and the glory of God, or the sensible light-filled manifestation of God's presence, especially is his definitive self-revelation at the end of time, in the days of the definitive eschatological salvation. Eschatology is the study of the end of the world. This theme is taken up again in Revelation 21:23. Interesting. Let's see, what do we got on this page? I think one of your names might be here. Nicholas. We'll read Nicholas, and then Nimrod. Nicholas was one of the 7 Hellenistic Jews chosen by the apostles to attend to the needs of the poor in Jerusalem. There you go. So if you're Nicholas watching, get out there and help the poor. Nimrod. In the genealogy of Genesis, Nimrod, son of Cush, was a great hunter in the eyes of Yahweh, and became first king of Babel, Erech and Akkad. This is certainly legendary, but the origins of the story are not clear. Some authors identify him with the god Ninurta, while others look for him among the legendary heroes of the world of myth, such as the Nephilim, or among the personages of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The myth of Nephilim. And the letter Q. The letter Q is from the German word Quell, meaning source. It is a usual designation for the material that is common to Matthew and Luke, but absent in Mark. So you can actually see here, this is why I can't completely write out Q, right? Because there could be something to it. You can see the first entry for the letter Q. He was an anonymous contributor to the Gospels. He or she. It. I don't know. It's a letter. Okay, what else we got here? Yeah, not a lot of your names are in there, but comment below if you know you have a biblical name. You want me to look it up. I'm not saying this is the definitive Concordance. I'm sure there's other ones and different names, different versions. Let's read about Revelation. That's important. Revelation, the New Testament apocalyptic book. The author declares himself to be John, and to have received the revelation contained in the book while he was on the island of Patmos, because I proclaimed God's word. That is, in exile on account of being Christian. Tradition, with few exceptions, has maintained that this John is no other than John the Apostle. Today, many difficulties are raised against attributing the book to John the Apostle. There are radical differences in style, language, and theology between this and other writings that with more reason are considered to be John's, the Gospel and the 3 epistles. For these reasons, the work is now considered more likely to have been authored by an unknown first-century Christian. Perhaps a real author wished to have his writing acknowledged as stemming from John the Evangelist. Nor should this be cause for wonder, as a procedure of attaching the name of some renowned author to a work was a general rule for apocalyptic literature, to which this work obviously belongs. This would send us on our search for the real author among the Christian prophets of the Johannine Church in Asia Minor. He would therefore have been a disciple of John. That's really interesting, because where was that shooting the other day? St. John the Divine Chapel in New York. I wonder if the Freemasons know who wrote think they know who wrote Revelation, right? Gotta do some deep research on this. Like, how many Johns are there? John the Divine, John the Evangelist, John the Apostle. Are they all the same John? I don't know. Okay, the book is famous both for the difficulty in interpreting it and for the variety of interpretations which have been proposed. But first of all, it is absolutely necessary to avoid that type of interpretation, which believes itself capable of discovering in the symbols used by the author veiled allusions to the later history of the Church, or to the total history of the universe, to the Great Western Schism, to Luther's Schism, to the French Revolution, etc. This type of interpretation is completely arbitrary, and will call God's word to witness fantastic calculations about the duration of the world or the imminence of its end. So, oh my gosh, dude. The internet is just full of people that talk about the book of Revelations that have never been to church. And that is exactly what people on the internet do. They try to interpret the book of Revelation as being this, like, calculated, computer-written document that predicts the future and is going to tell us what... No. It's ridiculous, dude. The things people say about the book of Revelation are outrageous. Absolutely insane. Just read it out of the Bible. Don't look too deeply into it, because it's a never-ending rabbit hole. But we know for sure that the book of Revelation has been inverted by Freemasonry and all these other Mystery Babylon religions, and it does appear that they're using it as a template for everything going on today, which is fascinating. Okay, the book belongs to the apocalyptic literature and should be rigorously interpreted according to its rules. Listen close. Above all, it intends to proclaim the sense of the future in the light of the whole history of salvation. In this, it coincides with the other non-canonical apocalyptic books, using, as these do, a common patrimony of symbols and literary procedures. Yet, it is distinguished from these in a radical way by the event of Christianity, which commands a different vision of the future and of history. For the Jewish apocalypses, the definitive eschatological event of salvation is still to come. Remember, eschatology is the study of the end of the world. Did it just go back to Christmas again? We'll just leave it on Christmas. But for the Christians, it has already happened in the death and resurrection of Christ, which is at one and the same time the exaltation of Christ to the right hand of God, and therefore his enthronement as Lord of creation and history. The whole future will be the coherent development of what has already been achieved by Christ. Christians are in reality living of what has already been achieved by Christ. Christians are in reality living out the last epoch in history, the final days, and already share in the goods of the future world, even though they are still bound to the figure of this world, which is inevitably doomed to destruction. From all the pages of Revelation leaps the vivid expectation of an imminent end. This, however, is more the typical disposition of every apocalypse, the climate in which the apocalyptic message is transmitted in an efficacious way of exhorting to fidelity and patience, rather than an exact computation of the duration of history and the hour when it is to come to an end. In the symbols used by the author, there are evident allusions to historical events, eschatological dimension, with which the historian does not deal. It is not, however, that the author is deceived on the date of the end, but rather that he discovers the deep core of all history in the conflict between good and evil, between God and Satan, which takes on body and shape in the institutions of the world of man. Okay, so I think what the author of this book is saying is that the book of Revelations can apply to any time, any person. It has to do with the eternal recurrence of good versus evil, the eternal battle that will one day come to an end, right? So it's not so much like an exact template of the future like people think it is. It's more to be interpreted by the individual in the individual time, I think. But then you have groups of people who literally use it as a template for their crazy agendas. Let's continue. These events are unveiled in their deep dimensions and presented as part of the paroxysm of the final conflict. Historical events are in this way easily transfigured as the religious intent of the author paints the eschaton with the external appearance of the events themselves. The Roman Empire and the worship of the emperor become for the author the incarnation of the beast, the irreconcilable enemy of the Lamb who has won the victory. Okay. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. We're just dealing with a Roman Empire again, right? And they've lost their sense of spirituality, and they're just worshiping this world. They're worshiping material things. They're worshiping their low spirits, right? So I think that's what the author is saying. It's like this book of Revelation can be applied to any time, right? And it will function in any time until the end. The book's theme, as it develops, makes use of the traditional and symbolic apparatus of this literary genre, where the principal law is not precisely the coherence and organic development of the subject. One looks in vain, therefore, for a division that would satisfy the logic of the modern reader. Indeed, some scholars believe that the book, as it exists today, is the fusion of at least two writings on parallel themes. This would explain some of the repetitions. After the introduction, there are 1. 7 letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. 2. The strictly eschatological part. A introduction. A vision of the throne of God in the heavenly liturgy. B. The first part of the eschatological drama. C. The second part of the eschatological drama. The persecutions of the saints and the victory of God over his enemies, Babylon, the beast, and Satan, followed by the resurrection and the judgment. D. The epilogue, the revelation of the kingdom of God and of heavenly Jerusalem, followed by the conclusion. Cool. We're going to have to read the book of Revelation on an episode, so we're on the same page. yeah, comment below if you have any terms or any names you want me to look in this book for. Let me know. I'll do my best to find them. God bless you guys. Have a great day. I'll be back.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.